This was founded by a man by the name of Anthony Fisher in post-war Britain. He was looking around and wondering what is happening to my country. And he read a book called The Road to Serfdom and sought out its author, the famous F.A. Hayek, who at the time was working at London School of Economics, and said, look, what do I do? What can we do to fix all this up? And Hayek said, well, look, go away, have a think about things. You know, politics is a bit of a difficult route. Why don't you look at a think tank? And so Fisher thought, well, what a good idea, and founded a think tank. His efforts over the years in promoting liberty were such that he was credited by Margaret Thatcher as being one of the few who saved Britain. Others have said that without Fisher there'd be no Thatcher and probably no Reagan. Without Reagan, the quote said, no Star Wars, there'd be no economic collapse of the Soviet Union. So Anthony Fisher's legacy is immense, and it lives on today in the Atlas Foundation, which since his time has grown to cover 80 countries and over 400 different think tanks, for which it acts as an incubator. So we're here to welcome Dan tonight to talk about Atlas, its experiences, and give his advice on what people who are interested in liberty can do to further those aims. Aside from holding the prestigious position of Atlas Chairman, Dan is educated in economics and holds a finance MBA from Columbia University, a successful businessman who's founded many enterprises. Dan, welcome to WA. You're here in one of the preeminent state in Australia. Thank you. We're a country that generally holds authority with a bit of contempt and a great deal of suspicion. We're a state here in WA in particular where we once held a referendum to break away from what we saw as the overbearing eastern states. The referendum only failed because eastern staters came over and voted in it. We also host a micro-state where a farmer, tired of having his property rights trampled on by federal wheat quotas, decided to declare himself independent, and Prince Leonard of the Hutt River Principality continues today. So we're a nation, and in particular a state of freedom-minded individuals. So with that, we welcome you, and ladies and gentlemen, Dan Grossman.
Good evening. It's indeed an honor to be here, and I want to thank Ron very much for inviting me and the opportunity to speak to you. You know, I was asked to speak about Atlas, which I will do briefly, although you've handled a good deal of it for me already. And but we had a very interesting dinner last night with a number of the people from Mannkal, and when we were through at the dinner, I went back to the hotel and I wrote another speech. Which was what I'm going to primarily do this evening. I normally don't normally read speeches, but since I just wrote it last night, typed it up last night, printed it off this morning, read it once this morning myself. This will only be the second time that even I have read it. So you'll excuse me for notes. But let me just first of all give you a few words about Atlas. The vision of Atlas is to, and I'm reading right from just to make sure I don't get anything wrong. Let me get that out of the way. Is a free and prosperous world where limited governments defined by the rule of law, private prosperity, and free markets. And our mission is to strengthen the worldwide freedom movement by identifying, training, and supporting individuals with potential to found and develop effective independent organizations that promote our vision in every country. We do this through four separate broad categories. We first of all have what we call our outreach and discovery programs. These are programs where we try and find people who are either interested in starting think tanks or have recently started a think tank, and we try to bring them into the network and try and get them to become familiar with the fact that they are not alone in the world, as so many people with our beliefs think that they are. Secondly, we have grants and awards programs where we actually provide financial support to think tanks, particularly think tanks in the developing world, where money goes further than it does in the Western world. And we will support think tanks for up to 5 years, and we will never exceed 50% of their total support. We ourselves do not take any government money from any government, and we require that any think tank that which we provide financial support does not take any money from either the American government or their own government. That's one of our requirements. We also have a number of awards and prizes. Our largest single award, single prize is $100,000 a year, or $100,000 each year for a think tank which we feel has done more to advance the cause of liberty than any other think tank has. These are being funded and financed by by philanthropist, the late philanthropist John Templeton, and his ongoing foundation. Thirdly, we provide ongoing training programs, and this has become a lot more involved over the last few years as the internet and other sources of technology have so much lowered the cost. Training used to have to be where we would have to bring people to the United States, or we would have to send staff to some foreign country. It was difficult, it was cumbersome. With the advantage of the internet, the advantage of Skype, the advantage of so much other technology, we now run a tremendous amount of online training. We still run an ever-growing amount of training on-site. We have what we call leadership training programs, which are run in exactly 8 places during the world during the course of the year. This year, we also have what we call summer schools, which are run by local think tanks, where we have this year we'll probably have about 200 of them run in various places around the world, places where you normally wouldn't think that Liberty has any fans or any support, places such as the Central Asian parts of the former Soviet Union, some North African countries, a couple of places within the Middle East, in the Sub-Saharan Africa, so as well as in weird places like Western Europe and the United States and so forth. And finally our fourth major effort that we make is with the network and collaboration. We not only do the training, but we try and get people together to try and meet each other, either in person, online, or a combination thereof, so that they can constantly try and exchange ideas, exchange thinking, exchange thoughts. We have websites now in 13 languages, English being one of them, and 12 other languages. Our most successful, in terms of number of people who actually look at it, as well as the amount of time they spend on it, is our Arabic language website, which we've been putting a tremendous amount of effort and tremendous amount of development in the last few years. On these websites, we have translated into the languages the great works of liberty, many of which were written in European languages, although not all. Some were written in Chinese, some were written in other languages. And then we also have a program whereby we take the best articles written currently, translate them first into English from whatever language it is, and then retranslate so that the experience of this into all the languages, into all the other 11 languages at that point, and then they're on the websites in each of those 11 languages, so that people around the world can have a view of how things are looked at by people in other parts of the world. Now, having said that, and I'll be glad to answer any questions afterwards, I'm now going to read to you the dinner that we had last night with Mannkal directors, and led me to doing some thinking, and so I'd like to address a topic on which I actually have some serious expertise, which is how business people can advance the cause of justice, respect for rights, peace, and prosperity. In reverse order, voluntary business creates wealth, not only for the owners or managers, but for the customers, the employees, the associates, the suppliers, the wider communities. Business that is the voluntary organization of production exchange advances prosperity very directly. There is honor and pride in managing one's business properly and adding value to the world, value with benefits far beyond those who reap the accounting profits. Moreover, voluntary business activity creates peace. One doesn't normally think of it, but every voluntary exchange undertaken with respect for the rights of all parties creates not only the intended mutual benefits, but peaceful relations within societies and across political borders. People have been covetous and desirous of goods of others since our species appeared on the planet, but one can obtain those goods either by force or by exchange. Exchange is both peaceful and it creates peace. The word economy, in fact, comes from the ancient Greek word meaning the management of the household, and was originally applied and was expanded by Aristotle to the management of the state or a large group of households. F.A. Hayek, whom you mentioned a moment ago in connection with Anthony Fisher, believed that it was misleading since what we call an economy really isn't managed by anyone as a household is managed. He suggested another Greek word, katallaxy, and since it's ancient Greek, no one knows whether that's the way it's pronounced or not, so that's how I'll pronounce it, which sadly has not caught on. It comes from the Greek verb katallasso, meaning to exchange, but it has the added benefit that it also is the verb used to describe the transformation of enemies into friends. And in fact, that is what voluntary exchange, organized in large and small by business people, does. It transforms potential rivals into cooperators. Voluntary exchange creates peace. As the old saying goes, when goods cannot cross borders, armies surely will. Business activity in free markets rests on the respect for rights. That's the baseline exchange, after all. We exchange not merely goods and services, but the rights to them. Here's where my own experience, I feel, is the most pertinent. We can only advance rights not by just respecting them when we engage in business, but by standing up for our rights and for the rights of others, by informing our fellow citizens of the rights, the rightness and the goodness, the justice, the decency of respecting the rights of others. Now, of course, most people, as they go about their daily lives, do respect the rights of others. Most people would not thinking of smashing a window to get something that they want, or killing another person because of disagreement or a displeasing look or remark. As civilization advances, force recedes. Among the things that I've always liked about Australia, and this is probably my 20th visit here, is that your politicians speak plainly. And as I have been exposed in particular over the last week, politicians' plain speaking as they run for election, it strikes me that what they plainly say is that when you vote, you should blatantly ignore the respect for others and their rights and their property. It seems that when men and women in free societies like Australia enter the voting booths, they forget their manners, as it were, and proceed to plunder and loot their fellows, order them about as if they were slaves, and often support the most egregious violation of the rights of their fellow human beings. It's our job as business people and as students and as lawyers and whatever we are to explain not only how voluntary action creates prosperity and peace, but why those benefits require the respect for rights of each and every human being to pursue his or her own good as he or she chooses. That our fellow human beings are not objects to be forced hither and yon by our pleasure, but are deserving of our respect. We understand that no one can predict the details of a social order in a free societies because social order arises spontaneously, whereas the attempt to impose it creates what Ludwig von Mises referred to as planned chaos. But for many people, such unplanned order seems inherently unjust because they don't aim at any particular pattern of fairness or equality or outcomes or national greatness or some other attribute that they think is just. But any order that is deliberately aimed at one or another outcome is almost certain to be unjust because it will entail the wholesale use of coercion to achieve it. And that, at the very least, when exercised by imperfect human beings, means oppression, arbitrariness, and the inevitable exploitation of power by the unscrupulous for their own personal aims. We need to show that just as a catalaxy is orderly without having one overriding goal or end, a social order generally is just when it rests on respect for other rights of all, without coercively organizing the disparate members of a society to achieve any particular end. Finally, how do we do that? I had a very busy career creating wealth for myself, my family, my employees, my customers, my suppliers, and the wider society. I was able to add value not only by introducing new products, but by cutting costs, thereby freeing scarce resources for more highly valued ones. Most people don't focus on this fact, but cutting costs adds value to the world. I was able to retire rather early at age 50, which was close to 20 years ago, and now I devote the expertise that I have to advancing liberty. I found that the same skills come into play. Finding new products or ways to cut costs add value. Helping libertarian colleagues to organize themselves into more harmonious and cooperative teams adds value. And promoting strategic thinking adds value. As was just mentioned, I'm currently the chairman of the Atlas Network, which was founded by another business person who appreciated liberty, Anthony Fisher, who we just heard about. He founded the Institute of Economic Affairs in London, and that institute helped save the nation that was sinking under socialism. He went on to found other groups in Hong Kong, in the US, and Canada. And then he set up Atlas to help train, bring together, encourage, and even sometimes coordinate the disparate groups all over the world that are working for our common vision of liberty, justice, prosperity, and peace. Today, as was mentioned, the Atlas Network has over 400 think tanks. I want to correct you, it's in over 100 countries, and I'm honored to be here as a spokesman for it, as a guest of Ron and of the meetup, and to answer any questions that you have, to tell you about any of the Atlas specific events that we have. In particular, I'd like to invite you all to our next local event, which is going to be in New Delhi in January, where we have our Asia Liberty Forum, and where we'll have hundreds of people coming together to discuss liberty. With that, I'm grateful for the invitation, and I would be very, very happy to answer any questions, and or sit down, whatever you choose. Are there any questions, disagreements? Yes.
What was the speech you set aside? Can you give us?
The speech was just a more detailed version of what Atlas does, going into the more specifics of the programs. I unfortunately only have a few copies, which I'll be glad to leave, and we can certainly get more copies, or just give me your card, or ask Ron to do so. We have a few copies of our Atlas Year in Review, and I was just going to go over various highlights, but everything is in writing. Everything is also on our website, atlasnetwork.org, including this report in a PDF in a PDF version. So that speech, I think, would have been less interesting to me to give it, but may or may not have been more interesting for you.
Dan, just a question. I'm pleased you mentioned the impending election. I'm a bit dismayed by the so-called Liberal Party at the moment, who who seem to be able to give up any of their supposedly libertarian ideals to win votes. It seems almost gutless to me. But what do you see as the future for these sort of parties which are necessarily populist to win the votes, given the amazing challenges that we face from things such as the welfare state? What do you see as the antidote, I suppose?
Well, I think the antidote is plain speaking, and to basically point out the fact that when something is taken, when something is given by the government, it first has to be stolen from somebody else for the government to give it. And when we hear people cheering or politicians saying and people not cheering that we should do this or we should do that, that if we're elected, we're going to have this program or whatever, is that people should state clearly and plainly, you don't give us anything without stealing it from somebody else first. Now, I don't know that that will sell people. I am not personally tremendously optimistic about my generation or the direction which the free societies are heading right now, because I think this populism and this welfare state approach is ever growing. In the case of the United States, there's an ongoing open effort to create class warfare. But I think that the only anecdote for the people who are not steeped in the ideas of liberty, have not read John Locke, have not heard of Ludwig von Mises, don't know who F.A. Hayek is, could not define socialism or liberty. I think the answer is that there is no such thing as a free lunch. That you basically, the only way that that the government can give something is to steal it from somebody else first, and that person is just as likely to be you as it is to be the next person. Now, I don't know whether that will be successful. I certainly don't hear it with politicians in this election right now in Australia. I've been listening hard, reading hard, looking for it, and don't see it. And it's very, very, very dismaying. Yes?
Dan, thanks for the speech. As a businessman and someone who's been in a leadership role, how do you sort of instill libertarian principles in the way you run your business and that type of thing?
Well, as a businessman, a business is there for the purpose of making a profit. It's there to serve its shareholders. They are its master, so to speak. And the political views of its employees, of its customers, really are not the concern of a business person. In my own case, what I try to do is I try to make the money and then spend the money in promoting the ideas of liberty. The particular appeal that Atlas has to me is the tremendous leverage of having 400 think tanks, having thousands of people exposed to what we try and do, the training and so forth. What we ourselves are not a think tank. We don't write policy papers, and we don't go around the world preaching or politicking or anything like that. What we primarily do is try and teach good business methods to organizations, so that hopefully some of it will stick. Some money will be available to doing the actual job of promoting liberty. When I was in business, and I used to be a supporter of many nonprofit organizations, I noticed that without the profit motive, it's very, very difficult to run an organization. That this is getting a little bit away from your question, and it became a challenge. How do you make nonprofits, whether it be a civil society organization or a government, how do you make it? How do you measure its success? So I have spent the last 20 years trying to come up with measurements. I don't have them yet. Hopefully I'll get them in the next 20 years, or some future people will do it. But in the meantime, what I think we can do is we can teach good business management techniques. We can teach nonprofits how to in effect manage their affairs so that their supporters are getting value for money. I look at my own job right now as being the representative of donors, past donors, present donors, future donors, and to try and have the waste and the inefficiencies within the organization as little as possible. We hear all sorts of things in the United States, and I know elsewhere, about how donor intent is not met because an organization was founded by some wealthy person or some group of wealthy people, and they had a mission, and that mission has been captured by some other organization, by some other group of people. That is a problem when it occurs, but it is minor compared to how money is simply wasted and misused by nonprofit organizations. It's not as bad as the government, but it is a concern. So I don't think that, so to answer your question, I don't think it is the job of business to promote libertarian ideas. I encourage business people or anybody else who's able to achieve wealth or even not achieve wealth to support financially and with their work and with their efforts organizations in which they believe, and then to carefully monitor to make sure that the mission is being done in as efficient and effective way as possible. Yes?
Related to what was going on just now, I believe that business can have a lot of philanthropic ends if you want it to. I'm just wondering, why is it that our society has bought into the idea that business is eating up all our social conscience, eating up all our resources and all that kind of thing, when the truth is business can be philanthropic if it wants to in almost any kind of way that a non-profit can be. So what has caused this shift in mindset of business as a provider to sort of a hoarder?
Well, I think that the greatest philanthropy that a business can do is to better the world through creating new products, creating new technologies, using technologies well, saving money, freeing resources, and that philanthropy, that is philanthropy. I think business is far too defensive about their role. I think that when businesses start saying, well, we're giving money to orphans or to anything else, that's fine. Let the owners of the business make the decision. Let the people for whom the business is working, who are its owners, let them make that decision. Let them use their money in order to do whatever they believe is right. But I don't personally believe, and this is certainly a topic which has been debated very widely throughout the world, and my view is not the majority view, but I don't believe that business has a role of being philanthropists other than to create wealth and then hopefully have that wealth be used to free resources from other activities, for other activities, and to advance technology and advance economies. And have I convinced you? No.
No, yeah, I do agree with it completely, but again, I think that the owners decide what they want to do with their profits, basically.
I'm sorry, say that again?
The owners of the business decide what they want to do with their profits.
You do or do not agree with that?
Well, I agree that they can do whatever they want with their profits.
Right.
If they want to make things more efficient, by all means. And if the primary goal is profit, there's no problem. But what I was trying to get at is that business has sort of become an evil, so to speak, that we have to turn to non-for-profits to do what some businesses can easily do.
Well, I don't know that businesses can easily do it, and it really is not a new. It's really not historically not new that businesses have been the bad boys, so to speak. You can read you can read history going back as far as history is written. You can read or watch the plays of Shakespeare, where business people are held in very low esteem. You can read the texts of almost any religion, and businesses are held in low esteem. I don't think this is a recent development. I think businesses have generally been, it seems simple to understand that there is a pie of a fixed size, and that whatever business gets, whatever profit is made, is taken away from somebody else. And certainly in the lifetimes of most people, up until 100 years ago or 125 years ago, where they had been able to see no progress, where basically the wealth of the world, the wealth of the individual, the wealth of per capita, however one wants to measure it, basically did not change century after century after century. When free markets began to develop in industrializing Britain, and then spreading to the United States, and then eventually spreading elsewhere, it so dramatically increased the wealth of people that today we can see that human society is advancing, but the attack on business goes back long before, and I was hoping that people can see in today's, as today, when they can see that they are richer than their parents were. Well, that's not always the case, but they are better off than previous generations. When life expectancy is increasing, this is not the work of philanthropy. This is the work of the profits created by businesses, which in turn has gone to philanthropy. When I was born, I had a life expectancy of 60 years. That was the typical of a male born in the United States when I was born. Today, a male born in the United States has a life expectancy of 80 years. And that is a result of the profits generated by business, and which in turn created, invented medical devices, made medical discoveries, used technology, built hospitals, and gave to philanthropy, which in turn passed some of it on to others. So I think that today, or say in the last 200 years, is the first time that business really has a basis to defend itself, that people can look objectively at the world and say, yes, capitalism can work, capitalism has worked, the society has become richer. When you look today at Asia, when you look hopefully 25 years from now at Africa, you see massive increases in standards of living. None of that has come through central planning. None of that has come from businessmen being ungreedy, from businessmen being philanthropic. It's all come from the introduction of profit motive and people seeking their own benefit. Adam Smith recognized it. He wasn't the only one to recognize it, but he certainly was one who popularized it in his Wealth of Nations, and today it's visible. I still haven't convinced you.
You have convinced me.
I have convinced you. Well, very good. You're the first person I've ever convinced. Okay. Yes.
Thanks for the speech, Mr. Grossman. So I was wondering what your opinion was in terms of US monetary policy at the moment. And I was wondering what you thought of QE in terms of the risk of inflation in the future, and whether that could lead to higher interest rates, and then across with the debt with the US government. Do you see that as a high risk? And if so, how do you see that turning out?
I'd say it's somewhere between a high risk and inevitable. The question is when. I don't think the question is if. When you print more money, there's a larger stock of it, and the price of it will go down, and ultimately the inflation is simply the price of money, or it's the same thing. So I think specifically quantitative easing, whether it be in the United States, the European Union, Britain, or now perhaps even Australia, is a very serious mistake. The governments, supposedly free and democratic governments, have discovered that they can steal from future generations and can remain popular and can remain in office today. And if you tell people, the average person who say is my age, well, you're stealing from your grandchildren, they won't agree with me. They'll probably do me harm, but the truth of the matter is that is what's happening, and quantitative easing is a very, very significant part of it. And I think as a policy, I think as economics was what was my original background. I think as economics it stinks, and as a policy it's horrendous. And I think it's just another form of stealing from the future, and inflation is a particularly awful way to steal from the future, because it is unknowable where the actual pain will be. Today, if you take somebody's money, if you take somebody's money today, someone takes your money today and gives it to somebody else, the result is visible and it's knowable. But quantitative easing, which creates inflation, is going to result in unknowable results. Many people, including me, believe that World War II was largely attributable to German inflation, and I very, very much fear inflation, and I think quantitative easing almost guarantees it. I just don't know when. And I don't have the confidence that when you have people who are in office for a few years and all they're concerned about is winning the next election and then going off into retirement, I don't feel that that's a healthy way to run society. So I suspect you agree with my answer for the way you phrased your question. Any other questions? I want to thank you very much. I'm sorry, okay.
Perhaps to continue on that theme, I guess my real concern is the lack of logic applicable. I mean, we know that logic is buying votes, and that's what seems to be it, because I think with a engineer's perspective, perhaps I had a different background, the welfare state can't continue in the trajectory it is, because you basically run out of money. I mean, as Margaret Thatcher said, you run out of other people's money, but either way, so it's all going to end in tears. I mean, if you end up with numbers like in the United States, debt ratio, 10% of the GDP, mathematically you can never pay that off. You just can't generate enough. So my concern is that what seems to be simple for a child in the mathematical way is too difficult for us as humans to accept the basic mathematics of the issues. And you're right, I mean, what is kind of made easy, just creating a new supply of money, and inflation is too much more, so it has to end in tears.
Well, I think what we should do is we have a number of young people who we're stealing from in this audience. I think that they should start a revolution, and you and I can support them, and hopefully they won't annihilate us. But I do think that I am optimistic in the sense that I do think young people today, students today, including many who I met earlier today, and have met over recent years, are becoming aware that this is an issue. If you ask people, do they, in the United States, do they expect to receive their state pension, or what do we call Social Security? Do they expect to actually receive it? The answer is no, they know they're not going to. And what is frustrating to me is they don't take the next logical step. Well, Grandma, stop stealing from me. It's so I think that the only hope, and I don't know whether it's to be, I try very hard to be optimistic. I think the only hope is that the young people today will rise up, hopefully peacefully, and will understand the problems and will try and put a stop to it. And but it's, it is going to stop somewhere, and hopefully it will stop in a peaceful way. It's in my personal, I guess, pessimistic view, it will not have a peaceful ending. You're going to have limited resources. There are going to be people fighting over those resources, and we're seeing little bits of it now in Greece, We're seeing little bits of it now in Hungary. We're seeing, but this is child's play compared to what will happen if they really do have economic failures. And I think economic failure is ultimately inevitable if these policies continue. You at least have a queen who can step in and say, stop.
No, that's my point. I mean, I'm pessimistic with you because when I say any tears, I don't think it's going to be a soft landing in this whole process. I mean, we see, as you rightly put out, we've got France, for example, really is not capable of supporting itself, but there is supporting stuff. Germans support the lifestyle, but ultimately, you run out of funding from your future generations, but you also run out of funding from other people's support. I mean, I would argue the Chinese are supporting the United States fundamentally to a large extent when the Chinese stop doing that. Anyway, I mean, we can debate about when it ends or why it ends, but I would agree with you. I think it will cause major social dislocation because I think, unfortunately, there's a whole bunch of people out there and politicians who don't believe that the economy is part of our social structure. They sort of take the economy as given, and it just exists irrespective of it. So I must admit, as a person, I'm somewhat pessimistic because I don't think you can move this aspect of politicians buying votes for the purpose. I think, frankly, that's the problem.
Well, to add a little bit more to your pessimism, and I see Ron's getting up to shut me up, but to add a little bit more to your pessimism, when you have the largest debtor and the largest creditor in the world having the two biggest armies in the world, it's sort of scary to think of what's going to happen. And that is a very, very frightening thing. And on that pessimistic note, I'll add the optimism of thanking you all for being here, and I really do appreciate the opportunity, and thank you very much for letting me talk off topic.
Thank you very much, Dan. Fantastic.
Don't go, okay.
Really appreciate such incredible insights from someone who's at such a distinguished level of one of the world's greatest free market and libertarian organisations.
Thank you very much.
Don't go anywhere, people. We have some platters of food coming around, so in a minute, go and refresh your drinks and stay around, have a chat, meet a few people and share some ideas. Before we do that, I'll ask strong names of the Mannkal Economic Education Foundation to give a vote of thanks to Dan.
Thanks, Paul. Now, our Mannkal Foundation is just one of these 400 think tanks that Dan's been speaking of. We're very proud to be part of the Atlas team. And it's been my great privilege for about 5 or 6 years to go to New York and Washington around about the November time and watch the graduates of the Atlas MBA program come out. We have about 20 graduates per year because these 400 think tanks and the others that are being generated all need to be staffed and run by proficient people, and that was actually training. I think it's remarkable. I see these youth leaders from countries all around the world, some of the countries I've never heard of, are being generated, and they step out and they stand there and they present their stories, the problems of their country and what they're going to do when they go back to their country. Inspirational stuff. And I'm just wondering, with a bit more tonnage, if anyone wants to support Atlas, I think it will enable them to not graduate 20 new think tank MBAs every year, but 40, maybe 80, maybe 100 per year. It can exponentially increase the tremendous effectiveness of Atlas. And I want to thank Dan on behalf of all of us. Dan's come all the way to sit with us today and listen to some of our returning scholars giving their stories. And he's been taking notes, and he'll pass those notes to us. So we at Mannkal will be more effective in what we're doing. So thank you so much. I enjoy my relationship.
Thank you so much, Ron.